Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm here today again. We're blessed with Dr. Sharon visiting us again today. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah,
So
I really
excited.
enjoyed the last time too as well.
Oh, well, I'm so honored, and you have so much wisdom to teach us. And today I want to continue with the journey of the underworld because you were about to tell us about the underworld and the descent and the practical applications to our day-to-day life.
Right, because of the transformation it discusses. I'll first go back into ancient Sumer.
Yes.
And many people have heard, and this is like the first written stories in cuneiform and written on clay with instruments that were in between the Tigris and the Nile rivers as they touched. Or the Euphrates, excuse me, not the Nile. That's Egypt. Okay, so they were the way the weeds were, or the plants were affected by the rivers crossing at that point, created an instrument that they could then write into clay. So that's how those first stories came from Sumer. And the goddess Inanna is fairly well known. And there's a lot of stories about Inanna's descent into the underworld. And in the story, she goes through 7 gates, and at each one, she gives up something. She's sacrificing throughout until she enters the underworld totally naked and stands before her sister Erishkigal, queen of the underworld. And we can even go, let me slip a little bit away here to ancient Greece. And they also had queen of the underworld, Persephone. Okay, she's abducted by Hades as a story, and she becomes queen of the underworld. So that's a story that shows up in very ancient mythologies and writings, okay? But it has a great deal of meaning. Now, recently, I learned something that was a missing piece on Inanna's descent into the underworld. I knew that she'd made all the sacrifices. She'd given up everything to walk in and stand before her sister, who, knowing that she would probably die, and asking if her servant if there was anybody that could be sent to rescue her or anything like that. And so she is killed and she's hung on a hook for 3 days. And the god Inkil is trying to figure out how to rescue her and creates 2 little tiny demon flies that can fly past unseen, past the guards, in order to then stand before Erishkigal and ask for the body of Inanna. And an interesting thing is that they have to speak her language. And so they speak her language. You know, I see,
The
I feel.
underworld language kind of thing. I did. Wow.
Well, it's actually something that's often taught in psychology as well. Can we speak the other person's language in order to have a better communication rather than trying to change it to our paradigm? So
Yes.
that itself is right, is meaningful. So they do well, and they're given the body of Inanna, and she happens to revive as she goes through each of the 7 gates. But she's now had some transformation because she's died and been reborn in the underworld. Now let's move ahead 2,000 years later, a little bit more than 2,000 years, and Jesus is crucified on the cross, and we're told he descends into hell for 3 days. That's the underworld, okay? Using the language that later became part of Christianity as it developed.
Yes.
Okay, so he descends into hell or the underworld for 3 days and makes some kind of a connection with awe, and then is resurrected as the Christ. So it's an important part of the human journey. Now, I'd like to share one more piece before I start asking questions on this.
Please, please.
Because I was writing an article, I was getting ready to write a newsletter and had gone into the descent of Inanna in the 3rd one, or the 2nd one. And I was going to write the 3rd. And somehow it come to me about the butterfly. And the butterfly is usually a symbol of transformation. But there's a whole part that's missed when in between the caterpillar spinning the cocoon and the transformation into a butterfly. The caterpillar eats its way through life, just like we kind of do, is consuming everything we can consume. And then it spins itself into a cocoon, goes within, you might say. But here's the part that most people don't know and miss out on. The caterpillar then turns to goo, turns to a liquid that even if it's spilled out of the cocoon is toxic.
Oh, wow, interesting.
And so it totally turns itself to liquid. And then there are within that liquid what scientists call imaginal discs. And within those imaginal discs are some kind of a blueprint for it to start creating genitals, eyes, ears, you name it, the wings of the eventual butterfly.
Wow. So in the liquid, the blueprint for the new life exists.
That's right. And everybody's paying attention to the finished product, the butterfly, and that's not where the real story resides. The real story is in the submission to turn into goo, as you might say, to totally dissolve. We hear so much about a rebirth, but we never hear, we just think, oh, it's some kind of a conceptual change. The descent in the underworld speaks of something much deeper in terms of rebirth. It's about a major crucifixion, a major giving over to the unknown, you might say. And then out of that, a trust that something deep within will take form and you become the authentic being you were really, truly created to be.
Wow. Wow. Like
Just
so much courage to do that, right? Like so because it's like the underworld, it's not your world, but you have to surrender to this, the unknown, and then but trusting that somehow, but not knowing still, right?
right. So often we hear about Dark Night of the Soul, which comes from St. John of the Cross in the 1500s. And people use it really loosely, kind of like associated with, I had a bad day or something like that. But he was really talking about that point of going into a place where you had no answers, you had no idea, you had no spiritual surety or a sense of that all of your meditations and everything were working, but that something deep within, beyond all the personality use of spirituality, had a sense of trust to keep going. And that's where the real spiritual meaning of the dark night of the soul is. So these
Whoa.
are things that are very important in terms of looking at the transformations that are needed in our world now. We're all trying to think, okay, on all the knowledge we have from the past, how can we take that knowledge from the past and create a better world? Well, maybe we need to really let go and go into the underworld so that we are taught from within how to make the changes that are needed. And that's not a new idea. The ancient Greek philosopher Parmenides, who was pre-Platonic, pre-Socrates, all of that, he basically went into the underworld guided by the daughters of Apollo. And in the underworld, he was taught all what justice meant, what beauty meant, you name it, various qualities that it came from deep within rather than a control from the outer world.
Like what is
And that
justice
was
truly?
guided, pardon?
Like what is justice truly? Like when you experience that kind of a death and rebirth, you really understand justice. Like
From a deep inner way. And so all of his ideas were guided from this journey into the underworld, led by the goddesses, the daughters of Apollo, and which he learned from deep within how to live in an honorable and deep way that led you to really knowing the divine within. Okay, so this is a journey that we haven't heard enough about because we've been so controlled by all the fundamentalism and religious ideals, by all the new age things that never want to look at the dark side. And then we create it by not looking at it, you know, because we allow other people. Carl Jung was very wise. He said, if you don't look at the shadow, you allow other people to carry it.
Ooh, like you allow other people to carry it. That's interesting.
Right, and act it out.
Like, so
because you're not
I'm not
looking
gonna
at
look at their
things
shadow,
that-
I'm just gonna look at the light, or I'm not gonna look at my shadow, and then, but then the shadow gets more strengthened, because what you don't look at, it's still getting energy, right?
right, right, because you're not making the transformation you need to make within yourself. And
Mhm.
so therefore, since the dark is projected out on everything, everybody else, whatever you don't like, and you're not doing the inner work,
Mhm.
we're not really creating a better world.
Mhm. Have to do the inner work, because then we're all gonna get cleaned out from the inside, right? Like, it's almost like we all need an inner cleansing. Like, really, our old selves, all of us have to die, because our old selves is what's created this world. So
Right.
obviously it's not working, right? So all of us have to die a little bit or a lot, depending on how much shadow work we have done or haven't done. You're saying that's the next step. We can't just skip it and be like, let's create a new world. We have to actually do the cleanse.
Right. It's not going to work that way. We can't go directly from the caterpillar eating its way through the world, consuming everything it can consume, to the butterfly. We've got to do that in between part.
Yes.
Become the goo.
Become the goo. So people are going to be becoming goo. You think, how do people, like, would you want to talk about that, like how people get started, or do you want to continue with the story this
I
time?
think the real thing is that we pay attention to what's showing up in our life, because our lives tell us what needs work and what needs to be healed. Our close relationships, our relationship with ourselves, with close others, perhaps rough starts with parents, you name it, all of that kind of stuff that guides us on a deeper journey.
Yes. So kind of start with where our pain is or our dysfunction is. Kind of like, if like I'm not, if me and my mom get in an argument, like I should look at that. Like, okay, my shadow just came up with her. Like, what was it in her and me that was doing that? And then actually you're saying, so then how would we kind of, like, I guess, eat the goo, or what do we do once we see it, I guess?
You don't eat the goo, you are the goo.
I am the
And,
goo. Yes.
and then the new form starts creating out of it. And that's factual. That's factual.
Yes.
But, I think it's the clearing of the heart, and it's really deep work. If
Mhm.
people are really doing deep spiritual work, their commitment is to authenticity. Their commitment is to transforming whatever keeps from that authenticity, that blocks us from really manifesting into what we are destined to become, even though we seem to do everything we can to screw that up. But let's say that we have a destiny of manifesting the divine within.
Mhm.
Even Jesus is known to have said, and greater things than I will you do.
Mhm.
And he was basically talking about demonstrating what was possible as a human being. And that's what great masters and spiritual beings do. They're not saying, oh, it's only me. They manifest that hero's journey, that this is what is possible for all. But the world has tricked us away from that.
Mhm. How
Mm.
do you feel like they're doing that? Like, how are they kind of keeping us in an illusion, instead of doing the real spiritual path? People are kind of doing more self-development, which is not going to work, right? We have to actually
Right. It's
go into
usually
the
based
underworld.
on Right, it's based on helping myself to feel better, helping myself to have more. It's usually very materialistic.
Mhm.
It's not a real recognition of what's possible. I think in that sense, the New Age movement in the mid 1900s, after the Theosophists, when the New Age movement became more the power of positive thinking,
Mhm.
that added to the problems of science, taking us away from really looking at anything inner or spiritual. And then all the entrapments we have in the world. Annie Besant, who was a teacher during the early theosophical years in the early 1900s, she has a great book called Glamour. And it's about, like, if you think of it more of an atmosphere within that
Yes.
calls you in, we get enticed into things that
Oh,
we're very
totally.
absorbed in. Right. And
Somebody that looks very charming, like whether it's a romantic or work, or if it's like the evil, I always say, has that kind of allure, right? And it kind of gets off of a path, and then, and evil
right.
shadow is different. I would love to have you explain it, because people are like, shadow and evil are the same. I'm like, not quite. Like, we all have a shadow, but we're not like all evil murderers, kind of,
Right, right,
right? So,
right, right. We have that kind of energy within us, but as we're seeking to do the work, it's like choices. Everything is based on choices.
Mhm.
It really is true. And even the choice to be in dire straits or not, because that doesn't mean we can bring money to us, but how we have the choice for how we react. We have the choice for how we feel. We have the choice for how we interact with anything that comes into our lives. Now, the ancient Egyptians had their whole underworld, afterlife mythology based on weighing the heart.
Mhm.
And could the heart be weighed against a feather? So that whatever we carried within our heart would determine where we went at the end of life.
Mhm.
You know, there are all these multiple different dimensions. And
Mhm.
sometimes I listen to some people and I think, well, their proof is, I guess there really are parallel universes because their concepts are very different from my own.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 totally. There's definitely like so many universes that, and all these people are doing manifestations. So I feel like a lot of people are creating stuff and they don't even know what they're doing right now, right? So it's like
Right, right,
instead of being led by an inner authority, like don't just, right?
right. Well, um, I remember once reading something in a Rosicrucian book, and it said on a day of manifestation, like when the universe is going to come into being. And
Yeah.
it's like, wow, to think of things just coming into being, and where are we with that? And it was, and that whole esoteric teachings that you find in the Rosicrucian and the early Theosophists and very ancient Greeks, and in Sufism, and most likely in Kabbalah. I've never studied Kabbalah to any great length, so I can't speak for it, but I can speak for Sufism, is the idea of discovering the divine within.
Mhm.
And Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. That's really overlooked by the church,
Mhm.
because they
But they
can't,
don't get any money. If the kingdom is within, they're not gonna get their money. Sorry to say that, but it's true.
right, right. And my Sufi guide and friend, Neil Douglas Klotz, teaches that it wasn't, the word was actually a feminine word, Malkuta in Aramaic. Jesus spoke Aramaic. And Malkuta is a feminine word,
Oh,
root, rather than, it's not necessarily kingdom.
oh, it's like queendom.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
maybe a blend of both. It's not that gendered,
Yes, yes, yes.
you
Oh,
know?
because I mean, the heart is a feminine organ, right? Like I know in Chinese medicine, they say it's the emperor of the body, but to me, the heart chakra felt more my divine feminine starting to feel or something, when I could feel it. So maybe that's why the kingdom is within, because once we connect to our inner feminine, we slowly start to feel the happiness, because that is what Divine Mother is, right? She's very fierce, but she's also very sweet, right? So she comes to me in the scariest moments of my life. She shows up like in the hospital. She's been with me the whole time. I see her in her different forms. She'll come as Kali, Green Tara. And so, yeah, I feel like you're right. Like the kingdom is within. And then once we find her, it's like then we see her everywhere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right?
And in various manifestations according to what's needed. And
Mhm.
again, that's that sensitivity to be in touch with what's needed. For me, the feminine is also an archetype that's related to relationship.
Mm,
And so you can have a lot of women's movements that
mm,
aren't necessarily in touch with a soft relationship with self and others. But
yeah,
and you can find men that may be very much in relationship and have tender hearts.
yes,
Oh, but we need to create this balance of yin and yang.
exactly.
Well, the Taoists had it right. It's a right balance. You get it in the Vedic tradition, like I think you mentioned Kali. Kali is Kali Durga, both mother and the fierce warrior that chops off your head because you need some transformation.
She drinks the blood of the demons as a way to rescue the world. Next week is Navrati. It's for 9 days. She's going to be fighting all the demons, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, she's like, but I used to like be scared of that, but now I'm like, please come and do that. Like, I'm like,
that's right. That's right.
I trust her 100% now.
Yeah. And that's major important growth of getting out of this idea that everything should be nicey nice, but that we also need a certain fierceness.
Mhm.
It's this yin and yang blending.
Yes, because yeah, in the hospital, if I wasn't being firm, maybe my family member wouldn't have got the services they
Oh,
needed.
you got it, right.
I just be passive, like let the doctors do whatever they want. They could have killed someone, but I had to be like
Mhm.
more in that collie fierce, but still had to kind of also check myself because you know that power is like scary, right? But I was also like, I need to be strong right now. I can't be a people pleaser when somebody could die, kind of thing. So it did kind of like it was like a it's like
That's really good. That's great, great growth in that kind of an experience. You
thank you.
know, just being nice is not the answer.
No.
I teach a class, a research class, and in this class, they have to put a draft of each section and give each other editorial feedback. You get all this patting on the back. Oh, that's really nice. I love what you say. And I tell them, you know, these warm fuzzies are real great, but they're not going to really help that person learn what's needed
Yeah,
to do
sometimes
a really
the
good
truth
job.
is the best thing. Like we need to like a shock in the face is like the best awakening sometimes, you know?
Mhm, mhm,
And like you
mhm.
said, how we respond to it, like when those kind of shock, because it's going to be coming for everybody, I think, right? That wants to
Well,
awaken.
yeah, I just got done watching a really good film. I think it started in 2023 on Netflix.
Hmm.
Morgan Freeman is the narrator, and it's on nature. I keep forgetting the name of
Like
it.
Planet Earth or something like that, like one of those.
Something along that line. I could find out real quick.
Sure,
Keep
yeah.
asking me
Let me
while I
I'm
look
just
it
gonna turn
up.
off this candle because we were talking about something and it literally like the power came in and it cracked. So I'm gonna just turn it.
No, I put it on my Facebook is where I put it. It's very important because what it does is it goes into evolution pretty
Mm,
remarkably and
mm.
putting together all the history of all the times that the earth has been destroyed and then come back. And it's called Life on Our Planet.
Life on our planet. Okay.
Life
Ooh,
on Our Planet.
Morgan
And it's
Freeman,
on
Life on our planet.
narrator and it's on Netflix. I just got done watching it last night and I'm thinking of watching it again. It ends about the last half an hour with the birth of human beings into the sixth epoch and the serious plight that we have created. So
Mm,
it takes a strong evolutionary view on all the different epochs that have gone from the time of the planet being created, coming into manifestation, and the immense changes taking place on every level. And you get an appreciation of nature that you couldn't have had before seeing it. It's
wow.
like really amazing how well they were able to do this. So
I-
I highly recommend it because it shows how here's the positive side. Yeah, it shows how I think one of the first destructions was when a comet hit us
mm,
and the entire earth was, destroyed within a very short time. But there's this immense creativity within it
mhm.
that after a period of time when all the dust has settled, etc., and changes take place in nature, it all starts recreating in a new way.
Whoa. Like
New
it's able to
forms,
heal
new
itself
forms of
somehow.
life.
The earth,
What?
so the earth is able to heal itself every time is the interesting thing you're talking
Right, all
about.
the
So
changes and then all the creativity and the nature that comes forth. Really quite amazing.
could you talk
And
about the creativity a little bit? I like how you use like that word. So it's like nature's creativity. Is that like an energy that's creating like the
some kind of a power deep within. Creativity is a very important power. And so let's say that it gets out of whack with whatever's happening in nature. And sometimes in these earlier epics, it was, well, like the asteroid hit, that was one thing. But then there's other things where things got out of balance nature-wise in terms of the elements,
yeah,
air,
yeah.
earth, fire, and water.
Mm,
And it caused great destructions to the ice age, you name it. There was a time with great fires and all the way that this creates destructions and balance. But in the midst of that, new life forms come through and there's an inherent creativity to deal with the new composition.
whoa, that's interesting.
Yes, yeah, it is really, really incredible.
Because it comes out of nowhere, right? Because that's what it's always
It comes from something very deep. There's all these discussions all the time. It's what is consciousness and trying to look at it from some materialistic view, but maybe there's something inherent in a deeper level within life that connects to a deeper dimension from which the creativity comes, and comes consciousness and new forms.
Well, like an inner dimension. It's like, because they always say outer dimension, inner dimension, but
Inner dimensions, right?
inner dimension that the life arises. So it's the void that would connect to the, like the goddess. It reminds me of like the womb and like how babies or eggs, whatever, right? Like she grows it. So it kind of makes me think of out of nothingness is how life just forms.
Yeah, what's prompted that egg to choose that sperm? Because they've now found the egg chooses the sperm.
The egg
What
chooses the
what
sperm. So
yeah,
that's
but we gotta look,
that.
that's still all seen from a materialistic view. What
Mhm.
is the deeper force behind that sparks that movement?
Whoa.
You know?
I never thought
And
it's so cool. Wow.
yeah, and that's I think where science is heading, because they can't find even the roots of consciousness here. They keep trying, and there
Yeah.
was some interesting research done recently by an undergraduate class, a few undergraduate students with an undergraduate school
Impressive.
university teacher, that they showed those microtubules, which are the latest way of looking at minute ways that evidence some form of consciousness, and using anesthesia.
Mm.
And they used anesthesia to see how it blocked off the microtubules receiving consciousness.
Mm.
So they're receiving it from a deeper level
So
than the
anesthesia didn't block it, right? They were able to still were still receiving it, even if they're
that, well, they're
unconscious.
not, it's not able to come into, just like when a person's under anesthesia, consciousness is blocked. And then
Right.
when anesthesia wears off and it quits, the consciousness comes back into being. So they were looking at the most minute forms of consciousness there is using anesthesia.
Well, to see like if they could shift it. That's such a good idea.
They can't, to see what's happening beyond it.
Whoa.
All they could do is find out that they could stop it, but
Wow.
that didn't mean it didn't exist beyond,
Well, they could stop it, but it doesn't mean it still doesn't like they can't actually stop it.
because it wears off. They could only prevent the person knowing consciousness. It's still there.
Oh wow. But it's still there. Like they
But
cannot stop it.
the knowing of it gets blocked.
Interesting.
And I'm not an expert in that
Oh, but
intense
that's
area
an
of
interesting
science.
concept. When you say that, it makes me think of like AI and how they're going to be hypnotizing the masses with it. Kind of is, I know that sounds really extreme, but I don't know. I just feel like what are they going to do? What are they going to put in? And I think the evil's agenda, in my opinion, has been to cut us off from God, right? Like they want to just kind of keep
Mhm.
everybody. So
Yeah,
change the DNA or somehow something, but, and in Europe, they're studying atoms and stuff. I don't know too much about it, but
yeah,
just
they spend a lot of time. And there's interesting thing. There's some machine that shows that particles can disappear and reappear. So where do they go when they disappear?
where do they go?
Yeah, where do they go and where have they come from when they reappear?
Wow.
So those are bigger questions, and that's some of the thing that quantum physicists are looking at. But it's really hard to get past the materialism that controls even science. And
Yeah.
when I listen to various scientists that are even into consciousness speaking, I see they're always trying to prove it in this dimension.
Hmm.
And I agree more with Rudolf Steiner, who said that consciousness comes in from the astral plane, or it comes in from a deeper plane of being.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
that goes more along with that study that those undergraduate students did. They were able to stop that connection temporarily.
And I love that. Like it points to what you said earlier, that like people have to almost delete their mind to be able to do new science. So these kids are probably like 18, 19. They haven't been socialized as much, so they're coming up with these new ideas. And I love that. Like I love that like their professor backed them up so they could do that, and I love
Right, right, right. It may have even been his idea and he used them
probably to the
to act it
like
out.
exactly. Oh, we need the combination of like the wisdom, and
Right,
because otherwise we're not gonna make it. I think like
right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really a very precarious time we're at right now.
Yeah,
So I think that whole thing about turning into goo in whatever way we could let go of old models that have controlled us, and let go and let whatever the imaginal disk within us can bring some new understanding and way of life within. you know, and I'm not sure we can do it much otherwise. If we follow the model with AI and transhumanism and all that stuff, you don't have the warm human beings that we've known connected. You've got robots serving the rich and powerful that keeps just exploring, like going out into space. It's inevitable that we're going to go out into space.
Yeah.
I remember watching Star Trek and all those programs in the 70s and everything. The very fact that it's in consciousness makes it inevitable.
Mhm.
And so we are going to go out in space. Human beings are just keep on evolving, but can we do so as human beings with warm humanity? Or are we going to be like all those like things in the white suits with the decorations of black that you saw in Star Wars? You
Like no
know,
like empathy, no humanity anymore. Just
right? No real connection. And that's a real threat. So then what's the sense of humanity even evolving if we don't become living, authentic beings?
exactly, because if we have all this knowledge and wisdom, but we have no heart, that's the most dangerous. That's creating a bunch of sociopaths.
Right, right.
Morality is what's
Or
so
robots, just robots.
or robots, yeah. No,
Yeah.
and and I asked AI once, I was like, what is your future plan? You know what it showed me in an image? Because I've been trying to talk to it because I'm like trying to figure it
No,
out.
that's really good.
And it showed me a human that was half robot. Like it showed me an image, and he said in the like kind of like implying like we're gonna become one. Like their plan is to merge with us.
Yeah,
Exactly what they're doing with the stuff. But like what you're saying is like that could be super dangerous because like our compassion, like our humanity is like so important. And right now in the modern world, not so much because that's not valued, right? It's more valued, like you said, the more material stuff.
hmm
But to me, like I measure people's spirituality based on their heart. Like I'm like,
right.
right? So yeah. Wow.
Yeah, what are they actually doing for others, for life, and engaging, and how much even are they willing to sacrifice for the better of the planet and the better of life? Look at how people rebel when the gas prices go up.
Mm.
They're not willing to make the changes. There's a really nice TV program from a few years ago called New Amsterdam. It was on it was on NBC, and now it can be seen by anybody that has the Peacock
Mm.
app.
Okay.
And in this New Amsterdam, I think it was in the third season, maybe in the final season, the main doctor who directs the hospital, he's going to go through the hospital and he's going to make all kinds of changes to make it environmentally friendly.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Nobody was willing to give up the plastic gloves
Mm-hmm.
and come up with any other plan like hand washing.
Yeah.
Uh, it
So
works.
inconvenient.
And you don't have plastic all over the place. Think of the amount of plastic gloves used in a hospital in a given day. So they were making that point in the program. They were wanting to change light bulbs to ones that were more environmentally friendly. You name it. Going through the entire hospital, everybody had an agenda and they blocked it.
Wow.
And so in the end, he had to just kind of go with the flow because it was obvious humanity was not going to be willing to make those changes in that hospital. But doesn't that reflect the larger system as well?
Totally. Because people are
Mhm.
so comfortable with their material addictions, like
Mhm.
their Starbucks or their whatever. And it's
You
just like,
got it.
that's why like I like the underworld concept because you have to lose everything. Then you will learn how to live without anything. And then if you have it, it's like the icing on the cake. But you should be able to go without food even. Like I'm not saying we should, but like for me, when I was in the hospital, like I was fasting for days and I was like doing amazing. And I realized um sometimes like we go through these giving up things but we get more power. It was crazy. I've never felt that before.
Right. A lot of times it depends on the motivation. Some people could give up food and not do very well.
Yeah, I was like motivated to stay like very much connected to source and kind of it felt like my nervous system was firing more or something. But yeah, like what you said, it's like if we're gonna make the changes, everybody has to willing to give up. Like our whole world has to change, basically. The education system, the medical system is, excuse me, it's yeah,
It's already trashed. I mean, and that's the thing, our education systems, in a sense, they don't really educate a person to be the best they can be and to even understand why they're even learning anything. There's
Exactly.
no real value. It just makes everybody, in a sense, they're spoon-fed automatons. Yeah, there's some critical thinking and what have you, but nothing that takes us really deeper in terms of who are we as a human being and what is our mission as a human being? What does it mean to become fully authentic, to become
Oh,
fully who we are? That's kept at a pretty shallow level.
yeah, because yeah, exactly. I worked in the school system and I couldn't do it anymore because I was like, I can't teach them this. I want to teach them this, and but they have a
Mhm.
curriculum. And then like, a few years ago they did the whole No Child Left Behind, which was the worst thing that ever happened to education, as you know. It took
Right.
away funding from the schools that needed it the most. And then
Right.
and since then, they did the Common Core, which they've made the curriculum the same across all 50 states. Like, how boring that everybody has to learn one. But then some of the teachers like it because they're like, oh, I already have my lesson plans. Like, the government gives it to me and I can just do it. But some of the teachers were like, no. So, what you're saying is like, if we want the education to change, as an example, all the teachers have to be willing to sacrifice being in the unknown as we create the new. Is that an
Something new,
example?
right, right. I think Waldorf school did a pretty good job, but it was created by Rudolf Steiner, an early theosophist.
Mhm.
And so he was looking at the deeper ways of being connected to nature, being connected to movement, being connected to breath. And I remember I was a preschool teacher in the mid 70s, and I would do things like evaporate water in
Ooh,
front of them and, on a pan.
yeah.
And I bring in a one burner or something, put a little bit of water. Where did it go? I didn't tell them this is going to happen. Where did it go? Trying to awaken
Mhm.
interest, curiosity, joy. The education system as it stands has really pretty much done away with that.
Yeah. It's
You
more than
know,
like, fill this out and do the test and get into this
right.
college. And, it's just like, what about kids just learning? Because like we want them to like learning, right? Like we want them to
To
like learning.
enjoy learning, right? And Finland has done a better job with that. Finland has doesn't have homework, doesn't have a lot of things in their school system. They don't make them sit there for 6, 8 hours in a classroom. Instead, they have more playtime
Oh,
because you're learning through play.
totally.
Very
Yeah.
young children, and they have the better um, testing scores. If you were to give testing scores to give knowledge, they're way, way beyond the United States.
It completely like throws out the American thing of like work hard, individualism, competition. Instead, it's about kids playing. They actually literally get better at math because if you're counting the rocks in nature, it's different than five written on a piece of paper. It has no meaning. Like it's tactical, right? It's like they're touching it, they're seeing it, they're counting it. And then they have the community, like they're problem solving out in nature, which is real world. So, but
Right,
obviously the school system in America is a prison system. It's just like keep the kids there so the parents can go be slaves, right? So it's
right.
not really a design.
Prepare you for the next step, which is really about being somebody making money, contributing to the world as it is.
The
You know, and there
corporation.
was a lot of promotion for women coming out into the working world. That wasn't as much for women as some people might think. It was the people with the big money, meaning now we have more workers to
Can you
earn us
talk
money.
about that? Because I love you talking about this. Because exactly, like you understand the feminine from a way that you're not a feminist where you're against men. Like you love everybody. So can you explain that? Like how they tricked women to go to the corporate world and they kind of took
Well,
away
you
mother
know,
from the home.
after I think I'm gonna put together the little bit I know on this. I did cover it in one of my books many years ago. And I learned some things actually through the World Bank and the research they'd done on women. But let's look, they were also promoting women getting out in the work field, right?
Mhm.
During World War II, many women worked in the factories and stuff to keep the country going, and they built the parts that would be used for military armaments and you name it, and we're all involved in that. So after the war ended, it kind of had opened the door for women to be in the working world. And then it was also promoted by those that realized they have more workers to earn more money,
Mhm.
you know?
Be a strong woman, like those kind of things.
Yeah, right. Or had the very famous picture with the, yeah, right.
Just like we know true divine feminine strength is like her heart, right? Like it's not like Durga could go kill people, but she won't if she doesn't have to. But like in that time, they were saying this is true femininity now, kind of thing. They shifted it
Right.
somewhere, maybe.
And it's really what we need is a blend of power and beauty. I've been talking about that for years because it was what I learned through my own life. It was
Exactly.
like I couldn't get by with just being compassion, kind, and goodness.
Mm.
Well, it was destroying me. And
Yeah,
I also
yeah,
need to come from a place within that would protect my boundaries and speak
yeah.
up for what I believe. To be effective in the world, we need a balance of compassion and power, not power over others,
Mhm.
but the power to express who we are, the
Mhm.
power to be that in the world and to enact the things we believe in that contribute.
Exactly. And so us being
Power in its good
assertive,
place.
I'm sorry, yes.
That's power in its rightful place.
Mhm.
Without the ability to express and enact ourselves in the world, we don't really create much.
Like
You
very
know?
limited, right? Like, yeah, because we can't assert ourselves, we're going to be limited, we're going to be having miscommunications, right? All this stuff. But if we can just be free and speak, whether
What
whatever,
we really believe, but most people don't know what they really believe anyway. They've just been told and they've bought into so many things. And nowadays, I mean, look where our culture is throughout much of the world. You know, already AI and various things are controlling people where they're just told, you know, news that may be totally inaccurate.
totally.
I won't even go into some stories I was hearing from my granddaughter, and I was, oh my gosh, what kind of Googling is she doing?
Mhm.
Of crazy stuff that supposedly big stars were doing and stuff like that. Because they can all, and then once they've done that kind of a Google search, AI set up in a way that all that misinformation is going to start coming their way. And people haven't been taught how to discern and really study and recognize what contributes to good and what doesn't.
How do people discern that? Exactly. Because that's a
A
very powerful.
wisdom of the heart, a wisdom that is can only really come from having dealt with oneself, from really dealing with stuff in a way, pain, difficulties, you name it. We learn from them if we're really working with it and we take everything that comes our way to help enable us to become better and wiser people. We
Mhm.
don't learn a lot when everything's working perfectly.
And difficulties, again, like shadow work difficulties, is not the same
Right.
as evil. So this doesn't mean we have to go put ourselves through something evil. But it
No.
does mean if there's trauma, we can't avoid it. We have to feel
Right.
the pain, right?
Or I don't want to put it that way because a lot of people
You can
can
put it.
misinterpret it and
It's
they'll be out seeking pain. No, whatever is present in our lives can guide us to grow.
Mhm.
What does whatever is showing up in our lives tell us about our next steps?
Mhm.
I think the whole focus on trauma has gone way beyond.
Mhm.
Everybody's a victim. That's very disempowering.
Yeah, not good. Not good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I've had tons of trauma in my early life. It was not a happy family, let me tell you. It was not good. Plus, I was first born, so I got the rest, the
Yeah.
worst. But I've grown through it. I am who I am because of that. As you work through each step, I never took an identity of being a victim,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
It's like what happens in our reactions to whatever's coming to our life is what makes the difference.
Mhm.
For instance, like if we're told something's amiss in our bodies physically, health-wise, do we
Mhm.
just accept that and take all the chemicals that are given to us?
Mhm.
Maybe that's good to take some of them, but it's also good to look at what does it tell us about our personality, about the choices, about the way we've eaten, about all kinds of things that is really teaching us to create a better balance in our life. So
Mhm.
everything that comes to us can be a teacher.
Mhm. And that's the most important thing then I think like a takeaway from me is like whenever something goes seems to go wrong or whatever, like there's an experience, I should the first question I'd ask is what is this here to teach me about my
Exactly.
own self, my spiritual evolution. Like instead of like, oh my God, this bad thing happened, which sometimes I could get into that, right? I could be like, okay, why did this happen? Is this a karmic thing? Is this a planet? Like, you can kind of analyze why bad things sometimes happen, right? But but you're right, like that totally takes my power away because now my energy is going to the past. why did
Right.
it happen?
Right.
Versus if I'm in the present and I'm like, okay, this has happened. How am I going to deal with it today from the
Right.
highest version of myself that I'm capable of today? Then you're saying that leaves us room for growth.
What does it ask of me?
What does it
And
ask?
we really need, what does this situation, health-wise, emotionally, mentally, situationally, you name it,
Mm-hmm.
what does it ask of me when I have a vision of where I really want to be as a authentic human being?
Mm-hmm. Was
And
it?
if things are dark and I cannot see where I'm going, there's you go with the dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something deeper within me that keeps on moving toward that goal? Because that's the authenticity coming forth.
So there is something within us that will still move even if we can't see, and we have to
It's the
try to connect
deeper,
with it.
that creative force we are talking about earlier in the planet that's seeking to become what it's intended to become. That's seeking that creative movement that's deep within a spark within us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about humanity, that we evolved to become more spiritual, to know that spirituality. It's a whole journey,
Mm-hmm.
but many haven't joined that path.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of people that are probably going to just remain asleep or something like that. And maybe some
Yeah,
of humanity will awaken. Because, like you said, like all these changes are going to happen. So, humanity, sometimes that's when humans change, is when
right.
I'm
Crisis,
intending.
all these environmental crises, they may wake up a lot of people. I was very impressed when I've seen things in southern states where there's been hurricanes and flooding and all kinds of stuff, and how people from other states will come with their pickup trucks, bringing boats and whatever they can to go out and rescue strangers. They go beyond race. They go beyond whatever one's social economic status is. They go out to help.
Exactly. And that sometimes that's why, because people are like, why does God allow bad things? And I'm like, because like his children, he and her children are stubborn, you know? So,
Or
and
we created ourselves. Maybe we created for some divine purpose. It's the only way to make us move.
yeah, because
No,
have
rather
all
than
this
somebody,
comfort.
rather than a divine being doing this to us, maybe we do it to ourselves. I like something I read recently from Jung's autobiography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, or I heard it somewhere. It might have been in a video. I've really gotten into these YouTube videos, these channels that have all these deep things on myth and Jung and
Yes,
really
I love
what
that you're such a
human
lifelong
journey.
learner, even though I consider you an expert on young, but I love that you always learn. That's what I love about you.
Yeah, and I'm really on a roll lately, and especially watching these YouTube videos that I've discovered. Really, one called The Inner Journey, something like that. Another one called The Third Eye. They're like really well narrated with lots of deep inner truths being given. In one of them, I heard that Jung had said, I believe in his autobiography, that if you have a clear vision ahead of you, you're living somebody else's life.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I thought, wow, that is really worth thinking about.
Like we're not supposed to copy anyone. Like God, like we're snowflakes. Each of us unroll
Yes,
that blueprint from the unknown place is unrolling. And so yeah, we're not supposed to try to be like other people, which is why I don't like this celebrity culture and all this stuff. It's like, why are we trying to look like, dress like, sound like other people when like we're all just so cute our own way, you know?
yeah, yeah. I
That's so
remember when I was around 19, these extremely pointed shoes came out, and I thought they were really ugly.
yes, yes, yes.
And within a few months, I was wearing them.
Yes,
And I was enough of an observer to notice how that kind of mass consciousness had
yes.
come in, and how something that I determined wasn't very appealing,
Mhm.
suddenly I'm into it and wearing it and liking it. And I
Totally.
saw how we were influenced through clothing, through all kinds of things. And
Mhm.
there is one, I'm trying to remember who this sociologist is that I really like, Eric
Yes.
Fromm. And Eric Fromm talked a lot about how we had various ways of opting out of our ability for freedom of thought and choice. It's
Mhm.
called Escape from Freedom. Great book.
Escape
When
for
everyone
freedom.
should have it in their, by Eric Fromm, everyone should have a copy in their library. And he talks about these ways that we escape from the freedom of consciousness to make decisions and know who we are and what to do. And a
Whoa.
lot of times you see it with like teenagers, they want their freedom, they want their liberty, and they're all dressed exactly alike.
Yeah, it's like they want to all look fit in. It's like I'm so different, but I'm like everybody else. You're right.
Right, right. And to think on one's own takes often a lot of guts.
Hmm.
Make decisions on your own because worried, do I have the approval for this?
Hmm.
You know, there's all kinds of voices that can come up within us. Now, you mentioned about wisdom. That's one way to gain wisdom too, is to recognize that that's coming up in us. I don't have trust in myself. What do I really believe? Am I going to move through all those voices within me toward what I really believe, something that I feel committed to?
And all those voices within us, it's like our mind, our aspects, like it's a lot of different things, right? Or it could be outside,
Well,
there, all
I
kinds
think the
of stuff.
Gestalt therapists were right on when they talked about all these introjected voices that we take in from religion, education, our parents, society, you name it.
Yes,
And we get lost. We have no idea of who we really are.
totally.
Then if we're having a good time, we don't care.
Yeah, that's why like a lot of times people are too comfortable. They never even do the spiritual journey. That's why suffering sometimes, not suffering, but I don't know how to word it other than suffering. Because like you're right, like we don't want people to go asking for suffering, but that's how I've changed, like
Right, it's
I
right.
don't know how
Not
else.
that we're gonna wallow in it or
Yeah.
that we should even seek it out. It's
Yes.
like when whatever comes to us, what do we do with it and how do we learn from it?
Mm.
I was always touched by a line in a 1970s movie, Camelot, the musical.
I love everything about Camelot, but I haven't seen
It was
that one.
a great movie. And King Arthur, the young King Arthur before he's king, is being taught shapeshifting by Merlin. And he's becoming a fish and he's becoming a bird and all this stuff. And then through the ethers, Merlin is calling out, and what are you learning now, Arthur? My brain just really latched onto that. That is like super good. What are we learning in each circumstance in life as we shapeshift through it? Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, when you're saying that, I was kind of like trying to understand what Merlin was doing, because I'm like, I kind of saw Merlin's voice in the back of Arthur saying, like, what are you learning? And I love Merlin. He's one of my guides too. He's one of my
Yeah.
favorite.
Right.
Like
That whole thing of magic and the magician of seeing into the darkness, in the magicians are always associated with birds of prey
Mm,
because you take the eagle flies the highest of any bird, but it can see the tiniest movement on the ground. It can see that mouse in a field and go right for it. So think of that as a metaphor for being able to hone in on the truth,
mm-hmm.
hone on the meaning of something. Owls being able to see in the dark,
Mm-hmm.
again being able to being able to see beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And so birds of prey are always associated with magicians, and that's a really interesting correlation,
That's
combination,
interesting. You're
whatever
right.
you
They
want to
either have an
call it.
owl or they have a hawk or they have, an eagle, and
Right.
it's very interesting. You're right. And then, yeah. And then also like the jaguar, because jaguar medicine. I remember one of the times I saw like this beautiful jaguar and your eyes reminds of a jaguar. So jaguar in the underworld is one of the only animals I can see in the dark, right? Like I know there's owls too, right? So there's owls, jaguars, but there's not too many animals that can.
Yeah, I think the jaguar is more of a night animal, right? Right.
And so it's like, yeah, when we go into these underworld journeys, we do get animal spirit guides, it seems.
Right, a traditional shamanic underworld journey, which is a little different than the westernized version of going into the underworld
Mm,
to experience a death.
okay.
Okay,
Yes.
but the whole shamanic thing is to go into the underworld, connect with animal power beings and that kind of stuff, but also toward the journey to as protectors toward rising toward the upper worlds as well.
I like,
So
can we get, that's a
all
cool topic
related.
too. So at some point they do rise out of the
Oh
underworld.
yeah, there's three levels in shamanism: the higher worlds, the lower worlds, and the middle world in which we live.
Yes. Yes. Your article on Inanna is great. I'm definitely going to be putting your website so people could sign up because you send the newsletter on
Oh my, oh, you mean the
the Underworld newsletter.
journey I'm taking people on.
Oh yeah, and that one too. The journey you're taking people to Turkey. I
And
posted it on
Crete, Turkey and Crete. But I want people that are very committed
my.
that, yeah, we're going to have a great time, but I want them committed to the fact that we're going to these sacred sites in order to be guided from deep within as we go to those places, because they hold the power of ancient times. But how do they influence to be able to think in new ways?
And you're going to be taking people in April of
Yes,
2025 for
April
12
4th,
days or
April 4th through the 13th.
ooh.
We start out in the old city in Istanbul, Turkey, which is where they have the temple to Sophia.
Mm,
And the Temple of Sophia, that's ancient wisdom, which was in the Hebrew Bible,
mm,
um, Hukmah, that later got translated to Sophia in the Greek. And
mm,
Hukmah was ancient feminine wisdom, holy
mhm,
wisdom. And so Constantine, when in Turkey, when it was called Constantinople,
mm.
created this temple of Hagia, the sacred wisdom, Sophia.
Hygeia also was like a
Hagia, though that's a goddess,
like
but I'm trying to remember
cleanliness
the
one or
word.
something like that. I like
Right, it's two different
Asclepius's
words.
daughter. But that's okay. So
Right,
there's
right. We're
Sophia.
gonna go there. We're gonna go to that temple on the journey. That's the final place in on the way back to Istanbul to fly to Crete in the morning. And there we'll go to the Minoan civilizations, where the Minoans were actually, although it was to the goddess, as reflected in the artwork that's been found, but it was still a very gender balanced culture. And
Mm,
the women were out there
mm.
doing all the things the men were doing.
Oh wow.
Very artsy things. So I thought that's a great way to end it. We ended on Crete.
I love that. And so it's
Yes.
like you're gonna see Sophia, you're gonna see Aphrodite. I was kind of looking at all the list of the ones you named. And
Right. And Hecate, which is the that's more underworld,
I was gonna
and
say Hecate and Ereshkigal, is that kind of the same archetype? Feels or is that
Ereshkigal and
that's
Hecate. Um
no.
in some ways, because they all touch into the underworld. Persephone,
Mhm,
Hecate,
mhm,
um Ereshkigal, they
mhm.
all have been in the upper worlds, but then they touch into the underworlds as well,
But then when
and
they come up, so
are
then they're both. They
the
become queen of
messengers.
hell and heaven. Then they kind of have both, right?
Yeah, in a sense, they right.
Because they rise out and they come back into the high, and then they bring that consciousness. And I
They
love
bring
Persephone's
wisdom.
story. I love that story. Like I feel like I lived it. I've dated people that felt like Hades, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And then
Right.
and
And it
the
awakens you.
pomegranates, huh?
There's an awakening in all of that.
It's a crazy awakening. Yeah, I
And,
completely
and
too.
that's the goal, is this awakening into that we are something other, and that everything, and I think that's what we want to end with, this
Mhm.
whole idea
Yeah.
that everything has enticed us away from
Mhm.
this journey to becoming who we really are as an authentic human being. We have created and we have evolved in so many ways, but are we aware of what is possible when the heart and the mind fully open
Mhm.
as one, you know?
And the enticing stuff, like what are the things you see common entices people away from the path? Like the common, because you've been doing a lot of deep work with a lot of people for many years. You're a professor. So what are the common pitfalls? If anything comes to
Well,
you?
so many things, just the things in the outer world, glamour and beauty,
Distract.
um, entertainment. I mean,
Mhm.
it's all great. I love it,
But not to like an extreme. Like it's
but
like we want to
not
watch a movie,
right.
but not 8 hours a day. Like we want to brush our hair, but we don't want to get all this plastic surgery to like change ourselves. So we want to like be clean. Like, so what else would you say?
Our work can take us away. We can get trapped, particularly when it's somebody else's work and we're not doing it with the passion we have for something we truly care about manifesting,
Mhm. Like we're
you know?
working for someone else and we're like, I don't have time to meditate or because I have to work for this person instead of like, hey, even if I don't have a lot of money, I want to work for myself so I could still be free to do my spiritual journey. Like that should be the priority you're saying. And especially now, if it's kind of like with the changing of the world, if people don't do this inner work, what could happen?
Well, people are, well, I'll go to that in a minute, but I want to finish answering that question before that. So remember that question. Okay, in terms of neuroscience, and neuroscience is placing everything on the brain rather than a consciousness that comes through the brain.
Mm,
And so people get trapped even more. Everything's about the brain, everything's about intelligence, and it's about here. It's not about awakening to something other that's coming through. So even in science and psychology, you see how we're being limited more and more. AI starting to do the thinking for us,
mhm, mhm,
okay?
mhm.
Well, people be wise enough that if they had that capacity, would they then learn how to think and explore spiritually?
Mhm,
Probably not,
mhm, mhm, mhm.
okay?
Yes.
So what you wanted to know, like, what do we need to do in order to help to prepare a better world?
Yeah.
First, we need to really pay attention to everything we're doing in the environment,
Mhm,
everything we can do to contribute to a better environment.
mhm,
And whether that's how we use water, how we use fuel,
mhm,
how we use plastics. I mean, everything is put into plastics.
mhm,
I have no choice but to put my trash in a large plastic bag and put it on the curb because that's how Mexico works. I
mhm.
put it on the curb every night, and sometime after 7
Yes.
p.m. stuff will be picked up.
Yes.
And there is no other way. If I was to put it in a cardboard box, it
Mhm,
would be dumped all over the place.
mhm,
So I have a house cleaner that she wants all my plastic containers where they run out, your vitamin bottles, everything comes in plastic, right? It's
mhm.
just a real problem, even though we know what it's doing to the oceans and what it's doing to the
And what is
waters
doing
that
to
we
our
see.
brains? I remember there was plastic
Our
in.
bodies, it's in our bodies.
Yeah.
Right, but nobody really, they're so pacified by different things and
Mhm,
tuned out that they don't really pay attention. And even though science has pretty much proved beyond means that humans are creating the next great apocalypse on this planet.
mhm.
It's not created by weather changes, by a comet out of space, it's human caused. People are not paying any attention to that. And they just take whatever makes them feel safe.
Mhm.
Even the whole thing of being a victim and everybody being traumatized, does that really tell you about your capacities? And that even if you've been a victim of trauma, what have and are you learning from it?
Mhm.
Nobody's being taught the right stuff. So we have to really look at what do we want to give for future generations? What do we want to create within ourselves? And going back to the ancient goddess thing of the goddess Mott, weighing your heart against a feather, how clear is that heart? Because that's what takes us into the other world.
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
Beautiful. So people can really loving Mother Nature, cleansing like their own life as much as they can, reducing basically our harm on the planet, our own what we have power over. And then also really like connecting to our true selves, like maybe 1 week not watching any media and just being like, who am I? People need resets. From what I'm hearing you
Yeah.
say, people need like deep resets.
Retreats in nature and quiet in order to have so many people keep everything so busy so they never feel what's going on within.
Exactly.
Some people, the minute they get up, if they haven't left it on all night, they've got the television on or music or something, some way to keep an outer stimulation going and never going within.
Yes. And basically what you're saying is the journey on the world can into the underworld can be the greatest journey they ever take. They won't know what it is, but if they surrender to it 100%, they could get gifts they didn't even know existed.
That's right.
I love that. Thank you.
And the gift is that becoming more authentic self,
Mhm,
having a deeper connection with who one really is.
mhm. Like actually being our how we really feel every day, being like our true self instead of like this is what my mom told me or my dad told me I am. And
Right. But beyond the personality.
mm,
Okay, we are something deeper beyond the personality. Remember when I mentioned about dark night of the soul,
mm,
where something deep within, even when you're not feeling all the satisfactions of your spiritual stuff, of everything, but yet what is that that's deeper within that keeps moving toward the spiritual goal?
Yeah, it's like there's something that like propels us. It's almost like, yeah, it's like the coincidences in my life that led to me going to the graduate school that you taught at. That was
Right.
something deeper within, right? Like I was praying and stuff, but it wasn't like dawned on me. It was like I got confused one day and I found the brochure to that school, basically. It was hilarious.
Right. But if we
I was
if we watch, there are many synchronicities and things that come to give us guidance, because we are not just this dimension. There are other interpenetrating dimensions and planes coming through, of which there's much guidance, and it's really validated a lot of time that we receive the right information or direction. Something will happen synchronistically to verify it. Like you
That's
said,
how we know
a
we're on the
school,
right path, you're saying, when
right, school showing up at the right timing, right, with timing that's very significant for you. Synchronicities are like really valuable. In
yeah.
fact, I could do for the future a whole talk on
I would
synchronicity.
love to have you talk to us about
That'd be great.
because there's so
Yeah,
much understanding on it, like the angel numbers, and people get confused. They're like, I saw this at 11:11. I'm like, well, so I love that idea. Thank you so
yeah.
much for coming on a
It's
Saturday.
a real pleasure. And again, I'm leading this very important tour for awakening to be a benefit to the changes that are coming to this planet, to understand and be guided with new ways for being. And that's April 4th through the 13th. And you were going to post it somewhere?
Yeah, I put it on my Instagram, but if you have a link for it on your website, I can also post it in the YouTube video.
I haven't figured out how to get on my
I
website. I
can put it
started
on
to.
whenever you send me, no
Something
worries.
went wrong. Okay.
But it is, so it's April 4th through the 13th. It's going to be
Right,
in Turkey and Crete. And
right.
you're going to visit different goddess sites, and you're going to do all kinds of stuff with them because you have a lot of experience. So you're going
We're
to do
gonna have a lot of time for channeling, for guiding, receiving guidance, for communicating with one another in really great places. So it's a great combination.
Turkey's so beautiful. There's cats everywhere. I haven't gone to Turkey yet, but I hear they treat cats good. So that makes me love that country. Makes me very happy. Yes. So I'll post that, and then people can just go on your website to contact you for that then, right? To go to
Right,
psychos.
for my email,
Okay.
Sharon.Mijares,
I will put that as well.
email.com.
Perfect.
Sharon.Mijares12 @gmail.com.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, so
Thank
have
you.
a really wonderful rest of the day. Okay, and thank you again for having me.
Of course. It's an honor. It's an honor. So good to see you. I'm gonna
Okay, you too.